So I'm recording. So yes, so this is a course entitled "Creating Concept," I think with Gilles Deleuze, and it's a course about the images. I hope, or I think, all of us here are interested in the image. And this course are going to deal with the image as image. You see, it's not a course just about art, even though art is, of course, the main topic. But it's a course that's going to try to think a language or a way of dealing with the images as such. Now, the images, you see, it's a quite large domain. You have medical imagery, you have advertisement, you have cinema, you have plastic arts, and in plastic arts you have, painting, photography, cinema, sculpture, and I include in the images also architecture. So you see, it's really like a huge domain, and so it's a huge domain. Okay, try to fix it next time. So it's a huge domain, but I hope you all can hear me. So it's a huge domain, and it really encompasses all of these things. Now, so what I'm proposing here is really a thought and an approach to the image as such. And you'll see that it's quite complicated to speak the language of the images. Really, it's very difficult to speak, to use spoken conceptual language without deviating and going above or aside of the image. And I think this is one of the most pregnant problems that artists and art theoreticians confront, which is as soon as they want to speak the image, not about the image, as soon as they want to speak the image, well, they start speaking about something else. I've been to many artist talks or to artists talking about their work, or even to art critics, etc., curators, wherever you want. And it's really amazing that when they want to speak about the work or try to understand the work, they start to speak about really something else. They start to speak about politics, about psychoanalysis, about Marxism, Freudism. They speak about, the political situation. They speak practically about everything but the image. And you have this kind of habit, or I can call it this kind of, it's like a bad habit and plea that is, even if you take someone like Freud, when you ask Freud to talk about Leonardo's da Vinci, a number of his paintings, the first thing that Freud does is that he codifies the painting of Leonardo by saying that this means that the eagle means the father, and the fact that the eagle is biting the lips of the child, it means that this is the desire of the child for the penis of the father, and this desire is repressed, so it takes another shape, and etc., etc. So this is a way of reading images. Now, of course, here I'm simplifying, but it's there. If you read Freud's readings of Da Vinci's paintings, literally, it's just about the father, the mother, the primordial scene, and he spends his time telling you this means that. So if you take Zizek, which is more recent, I think you know him, Slavoj Zizek, well, it's still in the same paradigm. So when Zizek wants to explain, let's say, The Birds by Hitchcock, well, Zizek makes the same gesture. He starts explaining to you via a very sophisticated conceptual framework that actually the birds in the movie represent the superego, which is incarnated by the mother. while the guy is in love via his ego with the blonde girl, and it goes on like that, on and on and on. So at the end of the day, what do you get? What you get is simply that the image is the support for the interpretations, for the conceptual interpretations that are going to give the meaning for the image. Now, in this course, we are not going to do that. We're going to do a theory of the image that speaks the image as such by looking at how you construct the images and not what the image means, which is very, very different, as you will see over the lectures. It's very different to explain. It's very different to explain how an image is constructed, meaning why do you put this with that? Why do you isolate a red color? And how do you isolate a red color? And what does this do? This is very different from interpreting what is the meaning of red. And the Deleuzean aesthetics, at least this is why I like it, that I picked it as a guideline. The Deleuzean aesthetics allows you to think that. It allows you to think how to construct images and to see that the really relevant thing in building images is in the way you build them and not in what they mean. So this is, if you want, the frontal kind of thing that we will not do here is to start like interpreting images without looking at how they are exactly, or how do they exactly work. So I've said that the guide, or the theory that is going to hold all of this together is the theory that you can find in 3 books mainly. You have them on the OneDrive. I'll explain that towards the end. You have 3 books, which are Deleuze Cinema 1 and Cinema 2, and Logic of Sensation, which are the 3 main books that we are going to deal with. Okay. Now, in these books, if you look at the title, which is l'image mouvement, l'image. Now, if you hear image mouvement, or the movement image, it's already a very weird title. Why is it a weird title? It's a weird title because if you are sensitive to these things, if you do, if you are into metaphysics, philosophy, and these things, it's as if someone is saying it is the body soul, or it is the devil god, or it is the things like that, or it is the matter spirit. So l'image mouvement already has a title. The book by Deleuze, l'image mouvement. So it's a very, very perplexing title because he's putting together as if it's one word, 2 opposite terms, which are the image and movement. Now, why is this weird? Well, it is weird because usually meaning in science, philosophy, biology, everywhere, we separate images and movements. I explain. Up till today, and since Descartes, and I think Descartes is in a way the father of all these discourses that separate, on one hand, what we call, in quote, serious sciences, like the grand sciences, like physics, chemistry, and the like, and pseudosciences like human sciences, aesthetics, art, lived experience, and the like. There's a kind of separation where we believe that your lived experience, let's suppose you are listening to Beethoven. If you are listening to Beethoven, this is a lived experience, it goes up and down, it takes you in all directions, it's beautiful, wonderful, okay. Now, if you are listening to Beethoven symphony, in modern sciences, if you take neurobiology or the size of neurons and stuff like that, they will explain to you that actually the symphony Beethoven, this is a kind of qualitative state, qualitative, emotional, intensive state in which you are. And this is your lived experience. This is what is referred to usually as the image, the imagery, the things that you see, that you taste, that you're affected by. And then movement is on the other side. Movement is imageless. It's happening in the brain. Today neuroscience explains that a symphony is simply a movement of neurons, of stuff happening in the brain. You have electricity circulating or chemicals circulating or both, it doesn't matter. But the main idea is that you have on one side movements, the movement of gray entities, of gray masses like corpuscles, and on the other side you have this other side, which is the lived experience. I think you know that it's very popular today. Like, what is love? Well, love is a kind of molecule. What is hatred? Hatred is another molecule, and you can like that classify all your emotions or your experiential states into abstract movements. But you can see that these two realms, and this is why I'm referring to Descartes. Descartes, he's the father of dualism. He thinks that movements are on one side and qualities are on the other side. He puts qualities, emotions, images, all of that in what he called the mind. And he puts movements and mass in space, and actually the movement in space provoke or correspond, cause for Descartes what's happening in the mind. And this is really like, if you want, today's paradigm. Many dualists are like that, and they think that you have this kind of, a dualist will think that these two are absolutely separate and God makes the coordination, while a realist will say that the material movements are causing the emotions in the brain. Okay, so whatever is the case, I hope you're getting this very, very simple idea, which is that today, for many still until today, you have a kind of stark separation between your subjective states, as we call them, and the objective course of the world. Now, what are the subjective states? The subjective states are, your experience. I'm in love, I hate, I'm feeling hot, I'm feeling cold, etc. And the objective course of the world is these things, which are the atoms or the energies, whatever you want to call them, that you can measure, that have a mass. And what really is determinant is the what is really determinant is of course, the objective realm. Okay, I hope this dichotomy is clear. So you see, this dichotomy can be illustrated in kind of little story, which is quite popular in neurophilosophy, in the philosophy of the mind, which is the story of Mary, the super neuroscientist. I don't know if you heard about her. It's a kind of fictional character. And Mary is colorblind. So Mary doesn't see, cannot distinguish, I think, cannot see red, cannot distinguish red from green from brown. So for her, she doesn't know as an experience the color red, even though Mary is a super neuroscientist, meaning Mary really knows everything about the functioning of the brain when it comes to seeing red. Okay, so Mary is a super neuroscientist then is going to one day she's going to make a kind of operation, and one day she is going to see red. Now the question is, when she sees red, this is the image. She has now access to the image and not anymore understanding the graph of movements and forces and the way masses and atoms and neurons function. So when she will have access to this experience of the red, the question is, will she learn something new? You see, it's a very, very critical question, because if she is really the super neuroscientist that knows everything about red, this means that objectively speaking, she knows already everything that we can know about red objectively. Meaning she knows what is the wavelengths of red, what neurons are activated when you see red. She knows practically, the chemical composition of red, everything that you can describe objectively about red. She already knows it, but she doesn't know. She doesn't know this experience. So it seems that when you see red, even though your objective language cannot really say, what am I seeing more here? Because if you say, how can you explain this more? If you say it's a wavelength, you already knew it. If you say I see it because of my neuron, I already knew it. If you say it's red because of the chemical composition, you already knew it. If you say it's red because of the optical light and how it's diffracted or how it's absorbed by solid bodies, you already knew it. So it seems that the image here is irreducible to the material description, and it is an excess or it is something more. This is why the philosophy of the mind or the philosophers of the mind call this problem the problem of the gap. It's as if there's a gap between the way matter works, and then, puff, you have these images that appear out of this material, which are red, love, hatred, all of these things, and they cannot really be reduced fully to the material functioning, because you can always feel that there is something more, this kind of crack here, there's a gap. You can't reduce this to that, hence the dualism and the persistence of this dualism. Just to let you breathe a little bit, I don't know if you know the movie maker, the German movie maker, a great movie maker, Fassbinder. Does anyone know Fassbinder? Just for us to react a little bit.
No,
Fassbinder, anyone?
no, but could you call this binding or binging? I don't know. Could you call this question? Could you call this question like a double binding? Like it puts you in a situation you know, but you don't know at the same time.
Yes, if you want, but it's not really a double bind. But yes, you can't put it like that. That end up knowing something, but you cannot say what you know. Yeah.
Yes.
So okay, I don't know if I would call this exactly a double bind, because a double bind is more practical. It's more on the practical side, where I want you to do something, but I don't want you to do it at the same time. But if you are hinting towards a kind of paradox, yes, there's a kind of paradox here, which is that we learn something when we see red, even though all of our objective language cannot really grasp this image. So no one knows Fassbinder. No one? Okay. So anyway, Fassbinder made a movie, a very nice movie, which is a kind of TV series that covers, the German, post-war Germany. But anyway, this is just an anecdote. And Fassbinder, at one point in the movie, there's a man killing his wife. And he takes a kind of big stone or something like that, or a piece of steel from the kitchen, and he starts hitting her on her skull. And actually, in the movie, it's too bad I don't have it now, but I'll try to find the clip. In the movie, you see that actually, while he's hitting her to smash her skull, what Fassbinder does is that he puts you the equations, the Newtonian equations of velocity, and how when you are using a mass of 1 kilo, you can crush the resistance of a skull of 10 newtons. And you have this scientific description of what is going on. And this, of course, made a scandal, like how can you, while the guy is killing his wife, put the physics of what is going on. And here, I'm telling you the story just for you to feel how indifferent physics is to the experiential as a lived experience, as encode the domain of the image, the mental, etc. So you see, what I'm trying to explain to you is that you have these atoms moving, these laws of movement, and they are really, really like almost indifferent to the experience as such, the lived experience, or what we experience as such. Now, to understand that a little bit better, and to really grasp this, today I just wanted to get it like that. You don't need to read Descartes or Newton or stuff like that. You just need to see a relation between image, movement. So for you to grasp this, from where did we get this kind of abstraction where all of a sudden the whole qualitative world, the word of colors, states, smell, emotions, all of that, came to be isolated from the scientific world or from the scientific way of understanding the world. So you have a kind of dissociation between, in quote, qualities, images, and quantities, movements. So what we need to understand is from where you get this kind of rupture, very schematically, just for you to feel where we are. If you take someone like Galileo, I hope you all know Galileo, and you know Galileo is the guy of the Pisa Tower, the guy that went up through balls and stuff like that. Yeah, so it's Galileo Galilei. Actually, he didn't need to go up to the Pisa Tower to do anything, because Galileo, contrary to what we all think, we think that actually what he did is that he went up and he was an experimental physicist. Well, actually, no. Galileo was one of the first theoretical physicists. What does it mean? It means that Galileo, and this is why he's very important, was one of the first, even before Descartes, to deduce how things will move just by thinking about their mass and their position. So what does Galileo say? Galileo say, if you have two steel balls, you have two steel balls of 1 kilo, and if you put them, if you hold them like that, let's say above 1 meter from the ground, and you let them fall, will they reach the ground at the same time? Anyone? Two steel balls, you're holding them at the same height, they are of an equal mass, you let go, will they reach the ground at the same time?
Yes,
no,
they would.
It depends on their weight interferes with the gravity.
In a vacuum, yes. This is the answer of Abed. So sorry, what were you saying? Who was speaking? Who was speaking? Who is
Noor,
who?
me. My name is Noor.
Yes. So tell me, Noor.
I think that it doesn't. They don't fall at the same time because they could have different weights which interferes with the gravity.
But we said that they have the same weight. We said that they have the same weight.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Two steel balls of 1 kilo having the same exact weight, the same exact shape, and you're in a room where there's not too much wind. This is to answer Abed, so it's like a vacuum, or there's no air friction, and you let them go. They are at the same height. Will they reach the ground at the same speed?
Yes.
Yes. Why? Because it's the same exact conditions, and you're letting them go. Same mass, same height. They should reach the ground at the same speed. So you see, Galileo then said the following: if they were distant like that, and the distance between them, horizontal distance between them, is 2 meters. Now, if you bring them closer like that, and now the distance between them is 1 meter, and you let them fall, will they reach the ground at the same time? Anyone?
Yes, also.
Also, why?
Because it's not in vertical, it's in horizontal, so it's at the same height of the ground, from the ground.
So are the conditions still the same for both balls? Are the conditions the same?
Yes, they're still the same.
They are still the
The
same.
only thing that the
Yes.
conditions are the same, but the only thing that became different is the space between, like the
Yeah. Does the
how much
space
space
affect
there's
any
between
way?
them.
Yeah.
How much
Does
space
the
is
space
separating them?
great? Does the space affect in any way the fall?
No, unless
No.
they're touching each other, maybe because like.
Now this is an interesting case. And then Galileo said, so let's bring them to close together and they're just touching each other like that. And we let them fall. Would they reach the ground at the same time?
Also, yes.
Yes. Yes, because you have two steel balls at 1 meter from the floor, they reach the ground at the same time. Now, if they're touching each other, can we consider them to be a steel ball of 2 kilos now instead of a steel ball of 1 kilo if they're touching each other?
No, because like this, the conditions has changed. Like
Why they change?
the
Now, 1 kilo touching each other, you let them go. Can you consider that now these two balls touching each other are like a 2 kilo steel ball? Did the
no.
condition change?
Excuse me.
Now you have two balls touching each other. Each one is of 1 kilo.
Yes,
Can you
and they became one ball. I understood, but I think that it's not the same.
Why you
No,
think
I
it's
think
not?
it's exactly the same.
Who
I
thinks
think
it's
it would-
exactly the same? The problem is not a force. Now we're just saying here it's a mental experiment. It's what we call in science a mind experiment. And Einstein was known to make a lot of these. We'll do some soon. So you have two people. Who thinks that they will reach the ground at the same time? Does anyone think that they will not reach the ground at the same time? At least we agree on this one.
I mean, they're like if they become one object, then it would be a different time reaching. But if it's still two objects, even though they're touching, then it's.
But how can you? Why they would be different if they are one or two objects?
Because
If they're
because
touching,
they're
huh?
heavier. The speed they're heavier if they're one object. The speed is like
But
it's different, and like the
how are they
conditions
heavy?
are different.
How? Yes, this is what you think. But how do you?
It's
Why are
because
they
because at
heavier
first
if they
they're
are
two
one
separate.
object?
They're two separate bodies, even if they're different from even if they're like close, super close and touching each
Yeah, it's
other.
like if,
But if it's one, they're
if
one.
yeah.
They're one
What's the
part.
difference between? So what's the difference between two balls touching each other? Can you consider this as one object? Put some
No.
very glue, put
No.
glue between them. They're not one object.
No, because they each have
Physically
their own
speaking,
mass.
I re-explain. If you put these two steel balls in a balance, would they weigh 2 kilos? Yes or no?
No.
Who is
They
for yes?
on a
No.
no. If
Can
you
you
put
repeat the
on a
question?
balance,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
So let's go one by one. Sorry, I'll go through you one by one. So Abed unfortunately cannot talk, but Abed, can you tell me if you put these two steel balls together? Abad? Okay, Abad.
yes.
If you put these two balls together in a tray, are they a 2 kilo ball? Yes. Abba. Okay. So, okay. So let's see. Aya. Aya, for you, if you put them
Yes.
together in a tray, are they 2 kilos or 1 kilo?
If I put them together,
In a tray. Are they an
They're
object? Is their weight together 2 kilo?
yes.
Yes. Okay, so
Yes.
are they the equivalent of an object which is 2 kilo?
Technically, yes, they are.
Yeah, there's only
But
technique.
they're still two separate objects. They're not one.
No worries, you can glue them. I mean, theoretically, are they the equivalent of an
Yes,
object?
yes.
Yeah. So if you bring them here, so for the others, Anna, is it clear? If you put them together, are they equivalent of an object of 2 kilos?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Does anyone do? Laetitia?
Non, je suis d'accord.
Tu es d'accord. Okay. And the Noor? Tu es d'accord?
Therefore,
Huh?
I'm still
Yes,
thinking.
Noor? You still think. So I'll move on because this is not really the topic of the course, but in this course you have to start thinking a bit like that. So if you put two 1 kilo steel balls together, so Abed is saying, but if we can consider them one object, that means that we can consider every two things exerting the same force on a platform as one. So I don't think we can consider them the same object. Actually, you can consider them the same object or an object which is equivalent to an object of 2 kilos. So, really what I'm saying is very simple. Forget the force. You have two steel balls. They're touching. Can you consider now that this thing is 2 kilo? It's not complicated. I'm not saying that now they are ontologically, like existentially, one thing. But this thing now together, is it 2 kilo? I think, yeah, it's not complicated. They're touching, they are like an object which is 2 kilos. But the problem is that if you let it fall, yes, okay. So the problem now, if you let the thing fall, it will fall and reach the ground like when these two fall separately. And this is how Galileo proves that an object of 2 kilos reaches the ground at the same exact moment as an object of 1 kilo, debunking by that one of the longest illusions that dates since Aristotle, where we used to believe that actually light objects will reach the ground at a longer time or will take a longer time than heavy objects. So this is how, via this intellectual or via this mind experiment, Galileo is always able to say that if you throw a feather and a cow from the Pisa Tower, they will reach the ground at the same exact moment, and not like everyone used to think before him that actually the cow will get there faster. Okay? And this is actually this is almost the foundation of modern physics, which is that the horizontal distance doesn't affect the fall of objects, and the fall of objects are only affected by the height, but not by the mass. Only by the height and not by the mass. And you can see here that actually what really counts now is simply the position of the object and considerations of his mass when it comes to horizontal movement and not of his mass when it comes to vertical movement. I know that this seems to be counterintuitive, but I advise you to log in YouTube after the session, and they made an experiment somewhere in Arizona where they have built a huge tower and they've thrown a feather and a huge steel cannonball, and you see them fall at the same exact speed until they reach the ground together. So Abad was saying that, well, it depends on the vacuum. Yes, indeed, because a feather usually, why it doesn't reach the ground at the same time as the steel ball? Because of the friction of the air. This is why you see it going down slowly. But if you have a vacuum and there's no air resistance, they will reach the ground at the same moment. Now, all of this to tell you what? To tell you something very simple, which is that with modern physics, movements are not dependent anymore on qualities. Movements are not dependent anymore on images. Now, who is the other great physicist, philosopher in this case, who used to say that actually no, movements depend on images? It's Aristotle. And Aristotle reigned over 2,000 years almost, 1,500 years and a bit more. So from 1,800 years until Galileo. And the theory of Aristotle, which is the more intuitive, this is why people, when they When Galileo was speaking, they thought that he's crazy. When he told them that if you throw a tiny cannonball and the whole cannon from the Pizza Tower, they will reach the ground at the same time. No one believed them. This is why he had to show them that he's right. But in any case, I hope you understood how he thought that via a mind experiment where you show that the horizontal distance doesn't affect the vertical fall. Now, in any differently, Aristotle, he thinks it differently. He thinks that actually images determine movement. This is the main idea that you need to understand. You have this opposition. You have a school, which is modern physics, that says movements are indifferent to images, and actually they are what determines images, like the neurons, or the wavelengths that gives you red, or all of these ways of conceiving things, that what is blue, it's 30 hertz, what is love, it's, I don't know, it's amphetamine, you know, all of these things. It's movement that determines the image. This is the modernity, the modern conception of things. While in a classical conception, from the Greeks to antiquity, etc., to the Middle Ages, they used to think that actually, no, it's qualities that assign movement. For example, how does Aristotle think the falling feather or the falling cannonball? For Aristotle, who used to observe things also, he used to see that feathers, if you throw a feather, it has a tendency to go up. Actually, it's carried by the wind. While if you throw a cannonball or if you throw a stone, it has a tendency to go down. And by observing these phenomena, Aristotle came with the idea that the universe is distributed among qualitative zones or areas. So you have the zone of the heavy, which is where you find the earth element. Then you have water, which is a bit lighter than earth and just supposed to be on top of it. Then you have air, then you have fire, and then you have ether, which are the 5 elements in the classical conception of the universe. So what does the theory say? What does the theory say? It says that actually things move because they try to reach their natural place. Why does the stone fall? Because the natural place of the stone is down. Why does water flow on the stone? Because the natural place of water is to be above the earth, and the air is above water, and so on and so forth. Now, given that beneath the moon, we live in the world of mixture, as Aristotle used to say, in beneath the moon, each body is trying to reach its position, but it gets hit by another body trying to reach its position. And this is why you see all of this mess around you. Now, all of this to tell you or to make you sensitive to one simple idea: movement, image. Modernity thinks that movement determines images. It's the movement of my neurons that tell me that I am in love, or I hate, or I'm hearing Beethoven. Or it is the movement of light that tells me that this is red or blue or whatever. It is the wavelengths, how fast this particle or wave moves, that tells me why I have blue, red, light, etc. So you have this kind of hierarchy, where in modernity it's movements that explain images, while in antiquity it was images, meaning the qualities, the qualitative areas of the world that explain why things move. Yeah. Why things move, why you see, yeah? Who is speaking?
Laetitia.
Laetitia, yeah.
Yeah, but at the same time, I mean, being able to have these neurons is a quality of being, isn't it? Like movement inherently depends on the quality of our brain, of our how we're conceived, as human beings.
But you have to think. What do you mean by the quality of the neuron? Yeah, does the fact that the neuron is gray affect in any way the functioning of the neuron?
What can you repeat?
If the neuron is gray, or it looks like that, does it affect, as Does it affect the functioning? You see, this is what he say. If you have, you know, Newton, does it matter if the apple falling on his head is red or green or yellow? You see, this is what they're saying. You know, today, if you talk to a guy, a science kind of guy, he tells you why all of these things that you worry about, you know, the colors, your emotion, blah, blah, all of this is reducible to equations that only describe mass and movement, literally. It tells you, after all, what is a neuron? The neuron itself is a ratio of speed and velocity and mass. And what the neuron does is also a ratio of speed, rest, and mass. So practically you can reduce the whole universe to an equation, and actually Newton thought that he had the equation, which is the universal gravitation equation, which is that bodies attract each other by the ratio of the inverse square of the distance. You know this equation? You see in this equation you don't have qualities, you don't have images, you don't have narrations, you don't
There's
have there's nothing in this equation besides the fact that you have a mass, and actually the
there's
mass
no specificities.
and actually the mass itself can be reduced to the distance and the acceleration. So again, to speed and velocity. So what do you have at the end of the day? You have space and movement. So this is why many today are still Cartesian, and really they believe that good science is a science that only reduces things quantitatively and reject all the intensive, qualitative, experiential, and all of these things as effects. It's not that they don't exist. They are effects of this gray, abstract, simply moving material. I hope you get at least this divide. So antiquity wasn't like that, you know. Antiquity, when something moved, it has a whole story behind it. The feathery, as Plato used to speak, is in its nature being of air, and it has the desire to go up. This is why, for example, Plato used to believe that the soul has wings, because the soul needs to go up, and the fiery is even above, and you have all these kind of cosmologies which are populated by, you know, by things like gods, demons, by kind of characters that really explain to you why things are moving this way. So really today is just this kind of very schematic, just for you to feel this kind of relation, movement, image, or the qualitative and the quantitative, as you usually oppose them, and this kind of opposition. Now you see things get complicated at the beginning of the last century, when Einstein came into the picture. So we've seen Galileo quickly, Aristotle, Einstein, which are the three epochs. So Galileo, movement determines image. Aristotle, image determines movement. And Einstein, he's going to say image, movement, movement, image, together, which is a novelty, which is a huge novelty. So Einstein, what does he say? Briefly, you don't need to go into this thing, but just for you to get that. He says the following. He says that recently, meaning in 1900, around 1900, exactly 1887, they made an experiment where they put a mirror on the Earth, and you know the Earth is spinning in one direction, let's say east-west, and they measured how fast the light hits this mirror if it's going in the same direction of the light or in the opposite direction of the light. So if the light is coming towards the mirror, or if the light is going in the same direction as the mirror. I hope you got that. It's not very complicated. Imagine light is a car and it's coming towards you, and you are in another car and you are going towards light, and we want to measure how fast does light look when I see it crossing. I hope you know this thing. It's a very basic physics thing. You know that if you are driving at 100 kilometers per hour and there's another car coming at 100 kilometers per hour, how fast do you see it passing by you? I hope you remember your basic physics. Anyone? How fast would it
Not
be?
really.
Huh?
Not
You would
really.
see it not moving.
What is the speed of this car? Not you're coming against each other, not in the same direction. Against,
I have
not in
no
the
idea.
Oh.
no idea. Okay. Now, so let's see what Abad answered. Can you repeat the question? The question: if you have two cars coming facing each other, one is 100 kilometers, the other one is at 100 kilometers. What would be the speed, the perceived speed, if you are in car A of car B? Simple.
50.
100 coming against each other. What would be the speed? The speed would be against each other, not in the same direction. Against each other. 200. Thank you, Abba. Okay, so this is the answer. 200. You know these things. You don't need to do math and physics. While you're driving on the highway, how fast does the car next to you look speeding? What is the speed of the car next to you? You see it as if it's zero. You can almost shake hands with the guy in the other car. While if he's coming against you, he will seem to move much faster. This is why in classical physics we say that movements here are cumulative. If you're going in the opposite direction, you have a higher speed, and if you're going in the same direction, you subtract the speeds. Okay, so whatever is the case, just to finish on that, and on this notion of image movement, just to show you from where it comes, Einstein says the following: we measure in 1887 that actually the speed of light is invariable. And it's a constant, which is c, which is 300 kilometers per second, 300,000 kilometers per second, and it's a constant. You should be like a bit amazed, which means that if you are driving your car and the light is coming towards you, and you measure how fast is the light passing by, it will always be 300,000 kilometers per second, even though it's going in the opposite direction, and you will not add the speed of your car to the speed of the light which is coming towards you. It's I don't know if this is a cosmological constant, maybe it's the celeritas, which is the constant, maybe it's the cosmological constant, but I know it as the constant of the speed of light. Yes, it's a constant. And whatever you do, it's always the same speed, which is weird. Why? Because for everything else, when you have crossing movements, you add the velocities. If I'm walking at 10 kilometers and my friend is passing by at 10 kilometers, I see him passing at 20 kilometers and not at 10. So for the light, it remains the same. Now, and this is where Einstein brings in another principle, which is the principle of relativity, which is what he's known for, which is, the scientist of relativity. And thank God he didn't say that everything is relative, as we usually hear it among, many people. You know what, Einstein, he's cool because he thinks that everything is relative and nothing is absolute, so you can do whatever you want. No, it's not like that. Actually, Einstein is saying the exact opposite. He's saying that the principle of relativity, which is a principle of physics, and is a principle that says that the laws of physics apply in the same way irrespectively of moving bodies. What does it mean? It means that if your water boils at 100 degrees in your teapot, if you are sitting at home at zero velocity, or if you are in a train moving at a constant velocity of 100 kilometers per hour, the water will also boil at 100 degrees. So the principle of relativity states that the laws of physics are indifferent when they are taken into systems moving at constant velocities. What he's saying is very simple. If you are in a train, the laws of physics apply in the same way as long as the train is moving at a constant speed. So, and this is where the image movement starts to get together, because Einstein thought it like that. He thought, if light is a constant, is a cosmological or the celeritas or a constant of the universe, meaning whatever you do is always measured in the same way, if I'm moving here in a train and I'm seeing light coming towards me, I have to see light crossing the area of my train at the constant speed of light, which is 300,000 kilometers per hour. But if we're going against each other, as you can see, the speeds should add up and light should reach the end of the wagon before and not at the constant speed. So the only way to keep the light velocity constant, the train needs to be stretched. The train needs to be elongated for the light to cross the same distance if you have an object going in an opposite direction. And all of this just to show you that now the image is stretching to accommodate movement, and sometimes movement will accommodate the images, and you start having this kind of mixture between images and movement. I hope this simple notion is clear. Is it clear? If it's not clear, I can repeat, or we can have, so Abad is clear. So for whom it's not clear? This way I can. Is it clear more or less? If light is moving, you have to see light always at the same speed. If it's crossing a train, the only way for light to remain at the constant speed, this train needs to get bigger. And actually, if we're going in the same direction, I don't know how to do it, same direction, the train will have to shrink for the light to cross the train at the same speed. And this is why in Einsteinian physics, you have these very, very entertaining things, which are objects stretch and shrink and stuff like that. And you see that now the world physically as an image is changing in relation to speed. So it's not anymore just a causality relation, it's really like movement and image are functioning together, the one affecting the other. And it is in this atmosphere that you have Bergson, which is another philosopher, which proposes the notion of the image movement. So now I hope you got this first conception of the relation between image and movement. Is it clear? So you have three positions. You have Aristotle, qualities determine movements. You have Galileo, it's movement who determines qualities or images. And you have Einstein, actually, the image varies in accordance to movement and the movement in accordance to image. So you have this mixture between image and movement. Is this clear, more or less?
Clear.
Okay. Okay, you just need to get this kind of simple notion because we're moving into that. We're in this atmosphere. We are in this atmosphere of the end of the century, of the beginning of the past century. So I hope by now this is more or less clear, and we can now move into some other considerations related to that. Other considerations related to that before we start the artistic stuff properly, that you need to know just like that to have a kind of map. We said that dualism is the position of Descartes where you have this opposition between movements and images, and you need a kind of miracle in between to coordinate these two things. This is dualism. I hope you just need to get this notion. I will not use it too much. Realism is when movement causes the images to be the way they are. So the neurons causes red, another neuron causes blue, or 80 hertz is blue, 60 hertz is red, and stuff like that. This is realism. Idealism is a bit different. Idealism will say, well, you know what, you have to start with what you see and then deduce movements and the laws of movements. What does it mean? If you take someone like David Hume, David Hume says that the real is what you see. So the real is not the atoms that are moving and which are only mass and which are producing these things you are seeing. No, the real is the image you see. This is why he's on the side of empiricism or empirical idealism. And what you see is there in front of you, and it is the spirit and the mind. Okay. And when you take this position, the position of this kind of empirical idealism, I'm mixing them now just for the sake of the argument, you can see that if you say the real is what I see, what becomes difficult to deduce is the movement and the laws beyond what you see. Because what is the problem with what you see? The problem with what you see is that it's discrete. I see my room, then I see the balcony, and it seems that this image is disconnected from that image. So if you are an empiricist, an empirical idealist, to put it more exactly, you will believe that the world is made of chunks of images which are disconnected, and your problem is going to be to connect these images together by finding laws that can relate them together, and you will do that by abstracting movements from the images. This is if you are an empiricist. If you are a realist, it's the other problem. If you really believe that the world is made of matter which is just moving, what becomes your problem? That of explaining how you hear Beethoven and how you see blue and why 30 hertz is blue. Did you get this tension? It's the same tension in a new language. Did you get the tension? Yes, no?
Yeah.
No. Yeah, you see, the problem is like that. The problem is, what do you put first? If you put first the images, meaning the world as you see it, you say, you know what, the world is itself blue. And in the world itself, you have colors, sounds, etc. What is the problem? The problem is that the world that presents to you like that immediately is ruptured. I'm looking now at my computer, I turn, I see the couch, then I look up, I see the ceiling, and there seem to be absolutely no relation between the images. So the difficulty for empirical idealism is going to be to re-explain how come we have a kind of continuity, a kind of solidity, a kind of things which are like the laws of nature, you know, a solid world. Because if you are strictly an empiricist like David Hume, you would think that the world, you know, is I see this and that and that, and there are absolutely no rules to relate this to that. And the world is itself green and yellow and sonorous and all of these are atoms of images, of sensations, and there's absolutely no connection as such. And this is why Hume will need a whole theory of habit, of expectation, that we will not do here, in order to re-explain how come we feel that the world is solid and not a set of disconnected images. On the other hand, if you take first the position of the realists, and you say, you know what, the real is made of matter, and matter is a mesh of connected things, and these things interact together by following laws, what becomes the difficulty now? It becomes, yeah, but how can you explain why matter, when it vibrates at 30 hertz, it gives you blue? Why doesn't it give you, I don't know, green or something else? What is really the relation between this quality and this vibration? You feel that they could be different. So it becomes a problem of the gap that we were discussing with Mary, the super neuroscientist, and the problem of how neurons can transform into music, how neuron activity can transform into music, or why amphetamine give me the feeling of love. So here you have this kind of gap, and in both cases you have a very serious issue. Now, to solve this issue, you had two schools, which are in line and at the same epoch as Einstein was speaking, which are phenomenology and Bergsonism. Now, phenomenology, I think if you are going to live in the artistic world or in cinema, you will hear this word a lot, you know, I'm doing a phenomenological description. Unfortunately, people think that doing a phenomenological description consists in describing your feelings about the work or about something. You know, that I feel that the work is deep, and I feel that this painter is touching on spiritual things, and I feel that he's aggressive. This is not phenomenology, okay? So phenomenology consists in showing how actually the subjective conditions affect the objective perception of the world. This is phenomenology. So I explain briefly just for you to get a kind of map, just situate these things. So what about phenomenology in this kind of opposition now between realism, idealism or empirical idealism, and phenomenology? Now, phenomenology are going to say the following. I'll give you the simplest example, which comes from Merleau-Ponty. I hope you know Merleau-Ponty, or that you will study Merleau-Ponty one day. He wrote a lot about the arts. So anyway, Merleau-Ponty says the following. He says, you see, when you throw a stone, you see it move. But how do you see it move? You see it move as something moving on a background which is not moving. This is how we see movement. This is how we experience movement. So when I throw a stone, I see it in a very particular way. I see that something is moving and something is not moving. Why Merleau-Ponty needs to talk about that? He needs to talk about that because for Merleau-Ponty, he's still Newtonian in a way. For him, movement is relative. As you know, relative not in the Einsteinian sense. As you know, if I'm moving and something is at rest, I can consider that the thing is moving and I'm at rest. You know these games. If I'm on a train, I can consider that it's the earth moving and not the train to make the train move, while I can consider that actually it's the train moving in relation to the earth. You can put, as you know, the origin or the reference point wherever you want in a classical modern physical system, meaning we can consider that the sun is the reference point or the earth, and we do this kind of calculations. I hope this is clear. Yes, this is not, no, we used to believe that the sun used to revolve around the earth because we used to see it move. But if you think about it now, if you consider that the earth is the reference, because we used to think that the earth is the reference point, so the way you're saying it, yes, I didn't understand it like that. So you're right. If you put the reference point in the sun, you will consider that the earth is moving. But if you put it in the earth, you can consider that it's the sun moving. Galileo said when he was condemned by the church, he said that, and yet it moves. They told him, you have to say that it's not moving. He said, yes, it's not moving, and yet it moves. The real meaning of that is that for Galileo, it's much easier to calculate the movements of the stars if you take as a reference point the sun and not the earth. If you want, this is to close this parenthesis and to go back to Merleau-Ponty. So what Merleau-Ponty is saying is this: why do we see things move? You see it move, but you don't see my head move. So
sir,
you have, yeah.
my internet is very bad and it's cutting, and I'm not hearing everything you say.
Okay, no worries. It's recorded. You see, it's mandatory to lecture. Me usually I prefer the audio recording system, but it's not a problem. So so maybe I can't turn off really my camera, but it's recorded. So you will get it recorded, and you'll be able to ask me questions later when the internet is better. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
Or can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's just sometimes it cuts, like.
Yes, I know. This is how it is for all the time. I don't know what to do, but you'll have a backup of audio recording, so don't worry. You'll have a backup of this session, and you have a folder filled with the course audio recorded that you can listen to at leisure. Okay, so you not lose the material. So all that I'm saying is this: Merleau-Ponty considers, you see, if you see the thing moving, that you specialize, you really like make it appear like that. Because actually the reference point can be the pen or can be my head. So we make it appear as a moving body on an immovable background because we are slow fixed creatures, says Merleau-Ponty, You know, we're sitting on a chair and our bodies are fixed and anchored and not moving. So for us to express movement, we express it in this dichotomy between a moving body and an unmoving background. Because as Merleau-Ponty says, the unmoving background is actually the reference related to your fixed body, while the moving things is taken in relation to that body. And this is why movements appears to you to be like that. Now here I insist on the appears to you to be like that, which is that movement is a phenomenon. This is why it's called phenomenology. Why do I see movement? Movement appears, it's an apparition, it's an appearance for me, and it appears like that because I am a fixed animal, I am a fixed entity, and this fixed entity will manifest the variation of position as movement. So I hope you're getting the twist. The twist then is not that movement is a reality, but that actually movement is already infused or an intersection between the subjective conditions and the objective positions. I hope you got that. You see, you have, let's suppose you have a number of points. You see, these points are going into variations in relations to each other. So these points are going into variation in relation to each other, and you cannot really say that this one is moving more than that one. They're all variating in relation to each other. So how can I express this almost total variation? For me to express that, because I am fixed, I will express it as something is fixed, which is the background, and something is moving, which is what I'm focusing on. And Merleau-Ponty gives a further kind of experiment for you to get convinced, is the following. Let's suppose you are in a train. Can you focus on the table of the train and see the trees passing by, or can you focus on a distant point, or can you focus on, or you reverse it? You know this. If you're looking at the pen, can you focus on the background or on the pen? So if you focus on the pen, you can do it with your hand at home. If you focus on your hand, you see that it's the background that moves. But if you focus on the background, you see that it's your hand that moves. And this kind of flip is because Merleau-Ponty says what you are seeing here now in front of you as movement is actually an apparition, it's a phenomenon, where what we are as fixed animal is intersected with the variation of position of objects in the objective world, and this intersection makes it appear as such. Okay? I hope you got this first notion. So in this first notion, what are we saying? We are saying that actually, yes.
I'm curious to know that.
Yeah, who? Noor, yes, Noor. Yeah.
I'm curious to know that in such a doctrine, when you say the objective of knowing, that you're also saying that everything around us is here because it's a projection from something within us, then in some sense it's not objective, it's subjective, no?
Yes, but in a way, yes, in a way, but no. For
like the
Merleau-Ponty, you have, huh?
It's like the allegory of the cave by Plato. We're like in this bubble of projections.
Yeah,
Comes from until you get out.
Yes, there are similarities, but you see, Plato would be a different kind of system, but I see the similarity. But if you want, is this for Merleau-Ponty, the variation of position of everything. Everything is now in a variation of position. For him, this is what he calls objectivity, and it's the picture of the world as it's described as by, let's suppose, Newtonian science. Is this first point clear? You know that now the sun is moving in relation to the earth, and the earth is moving in relation to the sun, and you're moving too, to some extent, and everything is moving in relation to everything else. Is this first one clear?
Yes, everything is interconnected.
Yeah, but no, not these things. Yes, everything is interconnected, but this is not the main idea. The main idea is that everything is in a variation of position in relation to everything else. Is this first idea clear? Okay? And they're all, of course, interconnected by the laws of Newton. Fine. What Merleau-Ponty is trying to express is something else. He's saying, yeah, but why do I see this move while the background doesn't move? Knowing that when this moves, also the background is changing in position, and hence we can't say that this is moving and this is not moving. We see things as things moving and others not moving because we are anchored perceptive being. I hope you're getting the twist. So
Yes.
the plane of where everything is variating in relation to everything, where actually you only see a kind of absolute movement, is interpreted by us, by some beings in the plane, as the dichotomy between background, foreground, or between the dichotomy between moving things and things which do not move, because we are very slow and we barely move. Did you get this? So we interpret that. It's kind of
very bizarre.
Huh?
It's very bizarre because it's very ambiguous. Like at the same time, we are fooled by our senses, but also our senses help us study this reality. It's very strange.
Yes, it is, but you're going a bit too far. So the whole idea is to stay around the problem. What you're saying could be interpreted like that. Yes, it's a paradoxical, or it's bizarre, because after all, we need to get out of the phenomena to reach the objectivity. And to do that, we need to understand what is really relevant, what is really part of the thing, and what is introduced by us into the appearances of the thing. I hope you're getting this.
Yes.
So, because what Merleau-Ponty is saying, when you see my hand move, it's not that in itself it is moving. It's simply that I picture it like that because I am fixed and I need to, my body would like to move with it, but it cannot. This is why, actually, if my body moves with it, I wouldn't see it move. But because my body would like to move with it, but it cannot move, you have this apparition, which is foreground, back. So anyway, all of this today is just, to do some mental exercises and to put you in the bath. Huh? But for today, you see here, now we have another point where you connect movement and image, or subjective and objective, or whatever you want to call these two opposites. Because now what is really Merleau-Ponty saying? He's saying that actually movement is itself affected by consciousness. It is itself the expression of us as conscious, perceiving beings. So you see, it's not that you have on one side what's happening in consciousness, the mind, and on the other side you have movements. What Merleau-Ponty is saying, actually, the movements themselves, the way they appear to us, this is already something imbued with consciousness, meaning with the structures of our way of seeing. I hope you get where he is. So if you take Descartes, it was movement is here, what's happening in consciousness or the mind is here. And then since Kant and Merleau-Ponty and all of these phenomenologists, they say, no, the mind actually structures something that they call the object, the in itself, which no one really knows what it is, but it structures it and it makes things appear as. So the variation of position appears as a movement on a background, and you have all kinds of appear as. Actually, for Kant, space and time are the ways of appearing of the thing itself and not anymore in themselves. But we are not going to that. What I just want you to feel today is that you have on one side now something absolutely unknown, almost no one knows about it. Kant used to call it the thing itself. You have on the other side the knowing subject or consciousness, and their intersection is the world as you know it, with movements and everything else you see. And here you see a kind of bringing together of movement and awareness, or of movement and image, because now they are on the same plane and not anymore one determining the other. And to conclude, which is the one that interests us, is Bergson. You see, the position of Bergson is even different. You see, while Merleau-Ponty thinks that everything is a consciousness of what is movement? Movement is the way I organize the thing itself. So it's a consciousness of the positions. Movement is the way I am aware of the positions that I will never see anyway, but that I suppose are there. So movement, background, is the way consciousness, when it relates to the thing itself, expresses or manifests or make it appear as background movement. So it's a consciousness of, and you see you have consciousness, thing itself, and movement is in between. It's the intersection of these two new metaphysical entities. So Bergson comes in and he says something different. Instead of saying consciousness is what we see is these apparitions, or movement is the consciousness of the variations of position or of the thing itself, Bergson is going to say something very weird. He's going to say, you know what? It's not that movement is the consciousness of the thing itself, but consciousness is itself movement. Consciousness is actually a type of movement. So he's reversing it. It's not that now movement depends on the being, the conscious being that perceives or that organizes the world in this way and makes the world appear as moving on a background. This is phenomenology. Bergson is going to say, well, no. You see, actually, consciousness, what we call consciousness, is not a privilege, something that organizes the world into movements. It's actually itself movement, and hence movement is primordial. It is before consciousness and not consciousness before movement. This is why Bergson says, you know what, the world is movement, and actually in the world you have one type of movement, which is consciousness, and we'll see what this means in 1 second. And it is consciousness which it is itself a type of movement, and not a movement, a type of conscious organization. So what does it really mean? And this is where we're getting into our stuff. After this long introduction, for me this introduction is like a workout, okay? Because in this course, you need to, be able to follow arguments and connect things together. So Bergson says, you know what, the given is that everything is moving in all directions. What I think Noor, I think, was saying that everything is interconnected. Yes, Bergson says everything is interacting with everything, as the Newtonian and even the Einsteinian physics taught us, which means the moon is interacting now with me, and I'm interacting with the sun, and I'm interacting with my table, and there are atoms in my bodies which are moving, and all of these movements are interacting together. The scientific conception of the world. It remains that in this kind of flux of total interaction, what we call a universal interaction, you have things like consciousness, like memory, like dreams, like perception, action, affection, which are themselves types of movements. I explain. You see, what Bergson is trying to say, when it comes to the image movement, actually an image cannot be an image unless it moves in a certain way. And movement itself is an image moving in a certain way. So movement, image are different ways of, are the same thing. It's like the recto verso of the same thing. I explain. If you take perception, what is perception? Before Bergson, we used to think that perception, it's the subject perceives the object, and you have a kind of image in the mind of the object, And the way the object affects the subject, the image in the mind is the perception of the object. This is, if you want, basically Descartes or realism. Bergson says no. And really, this is the main point and where you have to be in order to understand the theory of the image which we are going to deal with. Bergson says, if you really want to know what is perception, you have to put an image with another image, and this is when you know if there is a perception. So an image alone, one image alone, will never let you know if it's a perception, a memory, an action, or whatever. I explain. You know these cartoon movies. You know, the guy hits the wall, and then after a second, the wall kicks him back. You've seen that? Yeah, no. No one. So, you know, yes, yeah. So, you know, in cartoons, you have this scene where Bugs Bunny or Tom and Jerry, they kick the wall, and after 2 seconds, the wall kicks them back. Now, this is, when you see that, do you believe that the wall is perceiving the kick? Do you say, the wall is actually perceiving? Yes, no, maybe. So, yeah, okay. So I'll continue. So so what is the perception? You see, if you see an image alone, like this pen, you will never know if this image is in a dream, in the real world, a perception, an action, an affection, or anything. To know if this is a perception, you have, like in the movies, know how to do it very well. You have to put first my face, then the pen, and this is when you will understand that I am perceiving. So to have perception in the most basic sense, you need two images. You need an image, another image, or you need, as Bergson says, an image and another image, or a movement and another movement, and this is when you know that something is being perceived.
So what you mean is that?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah,
what
yeah.
You mean is that? What you mean is that? So the first image that has to be perceived is the image of ourselves, of our consciousness, to actually know that things are happening and that we are perceiving.
No, I'm not saying that at all. Actually, I'm saying the exact opposite. This would be, you know, for something to be perceived, you need an awareness, a consciousness, a living being. This is what we call perception. Bergson is going into a whole different direction. You see, he's saying this. Look at this bottle. You see it? If I give it a kick like that, let's suppose I kick it like that. If after 1 second it kicks me back, who says that the bottle perceived? Did you get what I'm saying? You have seen this in cartoons, right? I'll do it with the cap. This is the cap. I'll try to film it. So this is the cap. If I kick it and it kicks back, you consider that the cap is perceiving. You can tell me, yeah, this is funny, you know, this is anthropomorphism, this is just like that. No, Bergson is very serious. He's saying if you have an image that receives a movement and then it gives a movement in another direction, we consider this a perception. Why we consider this a perception? Because if I kick the cap and it moves in the same direction, do you consider it to be perceiving?
Of course.
Is it perceiving?
If it goes in the same direction, then it's a result of our kick.
Yeah, but do you consider it to be perceiving? So two situations. You come to a bar and you push your friend, he's, you know, like in a Western. Like in a Western, if it kicks you after a second, yes, it's perceiving. Okay, Abad got it. So for the others, if you are sitting in a, you know, in a bar, like in a Western movie, you're like that with your hat on, and another cowboy comes in and he pushes you like that and you fall on the table. Do we consider that the guy who fell on the table perceived something? Did he perceive? Or is he unconscious?
He must have perceived something, but the how do I say this? The strength of the hit could have made him unable to react to it.
No worries. So we'll do it differently. You go back home. Yes, oh no, not you. I go back home. My grandma is lying on the bed, and I wake her up, and she's not reacting. She's just shaking. I shake her, and she shakes. Can I consider that she's still alive or perceiving? If she doesn't, if she takes the movement and gives it in the same way that I'm giving the movement, she takes it. Is she perceiving?
No, she's not conscious.
She's not conscious. She's not perceiving. Perception is to have an image with a kind of awareness. Yes, Leticia.
Nothing. I said that it's consciousness. Noor was talking.
It's what?
I was talking.
Yeah, she was talking.
She wasn't, or she was perceiving?
I was talking, I was saying.
She wasn't perceiving.
She wasn't perceiving. Exactly.
No.
So what Bergson is saying is this. He's saying, you see, when an object takes a movement in the same way it receives it, like when you push, I don't know how to show it, like when you push this cap in the same direction, I'm pushing it in the same direction, it takes in the same way as it receives, so it's not really perceiving, or we don't say that this is perception. But if it takes in a direction and it jumps in another direction, we say that the cap is perceiving. Okay? So you have three cases, which are very simple. You have perception, which is I'm going to hit my hand, it takes the movement and it jumps in another direction. This is perception action. When it jumps in another direction, we call it action. But if my hand is here and I'm hitting on it, and you see that it's trying to move, but it can't move, this is what we call affection. It can't be more simple as a system. Huh? Yeah.
Sorry, but what is the difference between perception and perception action?
Action is the movement that you give after you receive. Perception is the movement you receive when you give it a movement which is different from the first one. Is it clear? So perception and action are a couple. So if I push,
the same.
No, they're not the same. Perception. If I do this, then I do that. The first one is perception. The second one is action. Okay. The movement received is called perceived. The movement given, which is different from the one received, is called action. But if I do this and I keep going down as if nothing is reacting, we don't call this perception. This is just matter. This is just, things move in the way they move. There's no reaction, as we say. You see, it's very basic what he's saying. What he's saying is forget consciousness, forget all of these things. If you want to understand how movement image relate, well, you have two cases. You have the perception action case, and you have the affection. Affection is like that. Let's suppose your head is blocked somewhere, and someone is punching on you. You start vibrating. When you start vibrating on your place, this is affection. People, when they're very angry, they vibrate. This is affection. And then you hit a punch. This is action. And when you see the guy that really, really annoys you, this is perception. Okay? So you have perception, affection, action. See, it's a very simple system where you can describe these in terms of image movements. What is perception? Perception is when I have an image moving in one direction, then another image moving in another direction. This is perception. There's nothing else in it. What is affection? It's when I have a movement which is being taken into the entity, the image, and the image starts to vibrate because it's taken in all the movements without being able to give another movement. You see where Bergson is. He's really in a plane where everything is moving, everything is giving and taking movements, and I take a movement, I give a movement, This is in the normal perception action schema. If I am a material, I give in the same way as I take. So I take in this and I give in the same way as I take. This is called matter. What's different between life and matter is simply that life doesn't give always in the same way as it takes. When it takes, it gives in another direction. I hope this is clear. So this is if you want perception. Yeah.
Sorry. Affection is then a part of perception. It's not. It is a part of perception, right?
It's a very good question. It's the exact opposite of perception. Why? And this is a new notion to get you inside this system. You see, perception is like that. Let's suppose you have your hand. You can always move the way you want when you are in perception. So you are free. So you say, I perceive something when you're able, in relation to this image, to give the movements that you wish to give in relation to that image. This is called perception action. I hope this first one is clear. On the other hand, let's suppose we are torturing you. What is the first thing you do when you want to torture someone? If you torture
hit him.
Before hitting
You tie him up.
You tie him up. Thank you. You tie him up. So to torture someone, why do you need to tie him up?
So that he won't be able to perceive.
So he doesn't move. You see,
Yeah.
what is torture? Torture is when you're sitting like that tied and someone is inflicting on you movements. And this is when you take this in, you're unable to move, and you feel that you want to move and you're unable to move. This is why it's affection, and you see that in affection, its conscious reactions are perception. Yes, if you want, we're trying to put consciousness on the side a little bit, but if you want consciousness, conscious perception is when you're able to move freely. There's a new notion now, that of freedom, while affection is the failure of your freedom. See, it's not the same at all. See, what is affection and what does really hurt? What does really hurt is when you have this desire to move and you feel that this desire is blocked and you can't do anything about it. In this experience, you encounter the other force and you feel how oppressive and violent it is. This is why to suffer, you don't need just, or you don't just have physical suffering. You have sufferings that comes from love affairs. You have sufferings that comes from the feeling of being defeated, of the feeling of not being able to do what you want to do. All of these are affections. Why all of these are affections? Because you're unable to expand the movement that you want to do in the world. So you see, this is why, answering this question, which is, I think, a very good remark, are affections and perceptions of the same kind? Bergson will say a categorical no. Perception is when the pen is at a distance and I'm able to move in relation to it freely. And if the pen gets closer and closer and gets into my eye can't move anymore. And this is the moment of affection. This is really the moment where I suffer and I experience the failure of my freedom. Because I want to initiate the movement and I can't. Now, what do the Buddhist and the yogi say? You know the thing that suffering is an illusion. Why is suffering an illusion?
Because it's part of your mind. You decide, you consider.
What do you decide? How can you stop suffering if suffering is the failure of your freedom? What should you decide?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, you know, the yogis and the Buddhists, they tell you that suffering is an illusion. It depends on you. Now we can understand that with Bergson. What should you do in order not to suffer? If you do
Not
yoga,
in your mind the idea that it's
Fight
not
back.
suffering.
You should fight back suffering. Who said fight back suffering?
Yes, it would make you perceive and make you like someone that's taking
actions in the situation.
No, if you are under suffering, what should
acting
you do?
upon it.
You shouldn't act upon it. It's the exact opposite. If you do yoga, you should not act upon it. You should not want to get out of the situation. This is when you start perceiving the intense things that you are perceiving without suffering. You know, if you are doing yoga, what you do most of the time is that you sit in very, very annoying postures. And when you sit in these postures, which are very painful, the key for you to do your yoga, meaning to liberate yourself from suffering, is not to react to the suffering, not to initiate the, I want to get out of here. Because this is under your control, and you can't suspend this desire to get out of here. Yeah? No? Did anyone speak?
I think that the only way to end the suffering is to accept it. When you
this is what yogi, but this is what yogi says. But
yes.
Yeah,
when you feel everything that you need to, it just makes kind of some sense. It doesn't bother you anymore. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, but we need to explain. You see, I hope in this course you'll see we really like heavy on explaining things. In the Bergsonian system, just before to the Bergsonian system, what would accepting mean? So, what is your example? What's your example?
There are some monks, for example, or like people like very into this philosophy you talked about. They can spend like hours on end in the cold without ever shivering. They just accept the shivers.
So do they suffer?
No, they don't. They don't feel the cold anymore. They don't get sick. They accept this unpleasant feeling.
So what accepting means? We're working inside the system now. So what is suffering for Bergson? It's when you do what? Really, you have to proceed now, right? If you don't want to get lost now. Suffering is what? Is when you try to do the movement and it's blocked. This is why you start trembling on yourself. I'm trying to get out.
It's like shivering.
Something is not allowing me. Huh?
It's like shivering when you're cold. When you
Yeah,
accept the cold, you stop shivering.
Shivering could be a simple physical reaction. The muscle starts to act. But when you are trembling out of anger, or you're trying to move and you're shaking because you're trying to move, this is different. This depends on your will. It depends on your freedom. You are initiating a movement that cannot reach. So Abad is saying that you have to gain objectivity in order to realize that suffering doesn't matter. It's not really that what he's saying. He's saying that if you just don't will to act against suffering, meaning to initiate the movement that will make you withdraw from the painful stimulation, this alone will make you not suffer as such. Because suffering is the failure or the defeat of your freedom and not the sensation as such. You see where he's putting suffering and sense and affection. So affection is not really perception, because something which is like the burning of a cigarette on your skin, it's still a perception if you don't react to it. If you start reacting to it and you're unable to take out your hand and you start feeling now this sensation as the vehicle for the failure of your freedom, you start feeling it as a suffering, meaning as an affection. I hope you're getting how it works. So you have two sides. You have the apparent world, which is made of these images, and you have the world of the will, where you initiate movement, where you are free. And when your freedom encounters something stronger than you, this is the moment of the affection. And this is the moment where you really feel the will or the strength of the other things. When someone crushes you emotionally, intellectually, or or violently, you feel how mean is his will, and it's as if now you know him from the inside. While you just look at him, you're just perceiving him, and you can think that he's mean, but you don't really experience his meanness until you encounter his freedom with your freedom in a kind of collapse. And this is when you have this kind of knowledge that Bergson and Deleuze are advocating for, which comes from the affect. You see? So now we are reconfiguring what we usually know. Knowledge is actually carried, or its place is in the affects. This is where you can really know something when you're able to feel it as it is, but you can only feel it as it is when it's going to oppose your freedom. It's going to really like put your freedom in a situation where you cannot bear that. And this is why art and aesthetics relate to these exceptional moments in your life where you feel that you were crushed by something, and the whole artistic experience or creation is going to be to reverse this experience of being crushed into an experience of reacquiring your freedom. So I hope now you see how the system works. Yeah, you know Rousseau. Rousseau actually wrote everything he wrote because one day Rousseau wanted to be a musician. One day he was going to apply for a music contest, and he saw a mountain, and this vision was so strong that he was paralyzed. He had to sit under a tree, and he started to cry the whole day. This is what you call an affection. If you take someone like Van Gogh, Van Gogh is someone who is so mesmerized by the sun that it made him go crazy. You know, he left his country, he went down south, and he spent the day just looking at the vibration of the sun. For him, the vibration of the sun is an affective experience. It's something that really is, that dispossesses him of his capacities and of his freedom. And this is the moment where the artistic begins. If you take Bacon, you know Bacon, Francis Bacon, the painter. So Bacon used to say, I paint the scream and never the cadaver. It's in an interview with Sylvestre, where Bacon says this sentence, which is very weird. If you want to paint a scene after the war, because Bacon, you know, he used to paint in 45, 46, and he witnessed the bombardment of London by the Nazis. And when he used to go out from the cave, from the shelter, he used to see dead people all around London and people that sometimes he knew. And for him, this was a very harsh experience with death. And when asked why he didn't paint the cadavers, you know, all these cadavers, Bacon says, no, you should paint the scream. Actually, what you should paint is how force, what I called earlier a will, which is in this case the force of death, impacts on your body and make you dispossessed of your freedom. It's only then that you can reconquer your freedom by becoming death. What does this mean? It means that if the force of death makes me scream, like in the scream of the popes by Bacon, you have this scream that goes up. So if the death force makes me scream, you feel it in your body and you are completely dispossessed from your capacities. What you need to do now is reacquire your freedom by regenerating, recreating the scream on the canvas in the case of Bacon. And this is when you're able to make this foreign force an ally, and you become this force of death. I'll give you another example, which is Hitchcock. You know, Hitchcock was terrorized by his father, which is a true story, and he used to always hide and wait and be anxious in a suspenseful state when in relation to his father. His father coming home, he knew that his father is coming home, And because he knew that, he used to hide, and he knew that his father is there. And this is how Hitchcock learned fear. And as you know, later, Hitchcock is going to become the master of fear by creating the things that he calls the image, or the image forms that he calls suspense. So he was able to master this emotion by understanding it and being able to recreate it artificially with the cinematic kind of medium. So I'm trying to tell you is this: in the aesthetics of Deleuze Bergson, what you need to see is that you have this kind of surface, which is action perception, perception, where you are free and you're moving on the surface. But at one point, or sometimes, you encounter a failure of your freedom, a failure of your capacity to generate movement. And this is when you have the emotional moment, and the artistic is going to be the reconquering of your capacities by being able to generate an artwork, by understanding how your freedom fade, by encountering what. And if we say that something here appears, if you know something in the encounter of this excessive force, art will be then the medium or the field of human activity that is going to teach us what things are in themselves. So if you really want to know what is a radiant day in itself, well, you look at a Van Gogh. If you really want to know what is a scream in itself, well, you look at a Bacon. And these artifacts, or you want to know what is fear, you watch Hitchcock, etc., etc. Here you're able to capture the real as such, and not a representation of the real. What's the difference? The difference is you don't feel in your bones fear or death or a radiant day or the feminine flesh, like with de Kooning. De Kooning was completely mesmerized by top models, and he used to think that the flesh of women is a force that impacts on him and dispossesses him from his capacities. This is why he painted woman 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So in this encounter of these entities, of these beings that are going to dispossess you from your freedom, you know them, and art is going to be the recreation and capture of this knowledge. And in the same time, a form of, in quote, even if I don't like this word, a form of therapy. It's not a therapy, it's really the discovery of new capacities. Because when you become, I don't like neither catharsis nor therapy. Because catharsis is actually, catharsis functions like that, you know, it's as an Aristotelian concept that says that when you go to watch tragedy, you feel happy because you see suffering as a perception. For Aristotle, at least, the accent is put that you are able to distantiate yourself from suffering because you see it there. This is why for him, tragedy, but also the picturing of morbidity, is always joyful because it makes you see that morbidity is not a big deal. So I repeat, you see, Aristotle used to think that if you paint cadavers, or if you make sculptures of things dying and stuff like that, or of suffering, it's always fun because you put it at a distance and you're free in relation to that. This is catharsis. Catharsis, I'm going to represent the things that were the vehicles of my suffering and not my suffering itself, the cadaver and not the scream. I hope you're getting this binary. Aristotle would say, yes, of course, paint the cadaver, because if you paint the cadaver, you get used to looking at it, and in a way, you become indifferent to it. What Bergson and Deleuze are saying is the exact opposite. They're not saying, you know what, art is cathartic or therapeutic. They're saying the exact opposite. They're saying, no, you shouldn't paint the vehicle of the emotion. You should paint the emotion itself, because only then you can become that which caused you to have this emotion. So you become death, you become a sunny day, you become feminine flesh, you become all the forces that we are going to see in the coming sessions. So what I'm trying to say is that you see that this aesthetics leads us where? Leads us to a point where we are effectively in contact with the real forces, not the abstract forces of Descartes, with the real forces, you know, the force of death. It's qualitative forces. It's not vectors. It's not forces of movements. It's real forces, qualitative forces. This is why it's a movement image. It's a force movement image with a quality, the force of death, the force of a sunny day, the force of feminine flesh, etc. And when you encounter these real forces, these image forces, this is where you're able to capture them in a work of art. And whoever sees that work of art, if it's a good work of art, he is going to feel what you felt. But now in a free way. So real freedom only happens after this moment of the dispossession of your freedom. So now if the real is in contact with these real image forces or qualitative forces, you have a distribution of the arts. You have bad art, which is illustration and representation, because bad art will only represent things without touching the force which generates them. For example, if you want to paint death, you will paint, you know, like a guy with a hat and he's all black, and you say, you know what, this is death. If you want to paint love, you will show people kissing. This is what we call illustration and narration. Unfortunately, most of the art is reduced to this almost lamentable state where people think that by just representing things, they are doing it. Bergson, there is no. If you represent things, meaning if you illustrate, if you paint a woman in love, or if you paint death, you know, like a little picture with a skeleton, you're not painting death. Because to paint death, you need to paint the feeling of death, because only in the feeling of death you encounter death, and only in the feeling of love you encounter love, etc., etc. And to be able to paint or make a movie or make a sculpture or make an architecture that can vehicle this being in itself of the force, you see that the being, the affect of love is not how love looks like. The feeling of love is not, you know, like people having sex or kissing, in the same way as the feeling of death is not a cadaver which is rotting, etc. Okay, so you see that now the center of gravity is now on the side of these real forces, meaning forces which are images at the same time, as this is what art needs to capture. Okay, now to conclude, because I still have only 2 minutes, but you'll be able to read about it. You have so far, I don't know, you will see you have it in the notes. We did the physical aspect, meaning physics, when it comes to image movement. We did the metaphysics, realism, dualism, phenomenology, Bergsonism. We did also the plastic side and the biological side. So we did the same thing in all levels. The biological side is what is affection perception. So when you move, you don't move, etc. And the plastic side is how do you do art with or within the system. Now there's a last level, which is the political side, and I'll just mention it in 2 minutes. You see, aesthetics are sensitive to the local context in which they are. For example, you have a way of feeling in the United States, which is not the same way of feeling which is in the USSR, which is not the same way which is in France, Lebanon, etc. So to give you a very simple example before concluding. You see, if you take an American movie, you feel that action and perception occurs between opposites. So if you watch Griffiths, as I hope you will watch the video clips which are on the OneDrive, if you watch Griffiths or any American movie, it's cowboy against Indian. So you have one hit for the cowboy, one hit for the Indian, and you have this perception, which is what you call a hard perception. Now, why it's a hard perception? Because the Indian will remain an Indian and the cowboy will remain a cowboy. and no one will change, and you'll have this kind of duel between cowboy Indian, and at the end of the day, usually the cowboy wins, and that's it. So you have what you call hard perceptions. The emotions are subjective because they are related to the individual accomplishment of the cowboy, usually when he faces the obstacles which are facing his personal project. This is why you have subjective emotions, which are usually represented. The scene of the kid under the bed, and you see him holding himself from crying while his parents are being massacred by the Indians. This is a typical affection image, where you are under the bed, you can't move, and what you're seeing is absolutely horrific, and you can't do anything about it, even though you wish to do something about it. And this is the affective moment in a kind of USA context, where you see that it's really grounded on the subject. It's a subjective emotion, where you see the context, the field of forces hitting your home. Now, if you take someone like Eisenstein, you have what you call pathetic montage and pathetic pathetic emotions, which is very different from the parallel montage. Parallel montage is when you have black, white, black, white. I am only a cowboy, I am only an Indian, Indian cowboy, Indian cowboy. You see how they relate. Now, if you take now someone like Eisenstein, you see Eisenstein, if you watch the Potemkin, I hope you'll watch these movies, they are mentioned in the booklet. Eisenstein, you see, he cuts on the matelot. So in the battleship of Potemkin, there's a scene where the ship is under the governance of the commanders, and you have a bunch of matlots who are doing the revolution. Like now in Lebanon, you have people doing the revolution. And at one point, the commanders wants to execute, they want to kill some of the shipmates. And you see, they bring everyone on the deck and they make them watch the execution. And at one point, Eisenstein is going to film the soldier looking down, and then looking to the execution, looking down, and then he looks up like that, and he says, comrades, what are you doing? So you see where is the montage now? He doesn't put, the crucial moment is not Indian cowboy. The crucial moment is happening in the matlot. This is the emotional moment. This is a moment where things are being decided, and he has to decide if he's going to accept that the commanders kill his shipmates, or he's going to rebel against that. And you feel that here it's what you call a pathetic montage, because now the perception, meaning the entity, is plastic. It's not anymore a rigid perception like in an American movie where you are black or white the whole movie. Now you are plastic, meaning you could become revolutionary, you could become conservative, you could go with the commanders, or you could go with the revolution. And this is why you have this moment of indecision on who you are going to choose yourself to be, which is what you call the pathetic moment, which is very different from the subjective emotion where you just see what the enemy is doing to you. So I hope you're getting a bit into these things. If you take Lebanon, for example, where would you put the cut? What would be relevant in Lebanon? Where would you cut if you want to make a classic Lebanese movie? Would it be between cowboys and Indians, between you becoming revolutionary or not? Where is the real cut in Lebanon, to see if you're getting it? And I'll stop, I promise. No one is here.
We're here, but I don't know how to answer.
So if you take in the States, the relevant opposition is Indian cowboy. In the USSR, the relevant opposition is between you becoming part of the revolution or you becoming with the Tsar and the established order. In Lebanon, where would be the
thing
where?
is that there are
Where?
And religion?
Religion and what?
Religion and
Muslim
like
Christian.
atheism.
Atheism and what? You see, me, I would put it between religion and civilian. Me.
Yeah.
So if you want to
Yeah,
make a
exactly.
movie, a Lebanese movie, then I will show you, for example, a guy which is very, very cool and democratic, and all of a sudden he starts behaving in accordance to his sect or to his religious community, and he becomes untreatable on some things. I think in Lebanon the flip is, the tension would be there more than Christian Muslim, but you can pick Muslim Christian. It would be more of an American movie. You see, if you really put them like two blocks in opposition, it would be more of an American movie. But if you put the line between being democratic, civilian, and your religious confessional side, you will feel that it's more of a Lebanese kind of perception. And the emotion, of course, is going to be here. Going to be, is he going to behave like he's belonging only to a religion, or is he going to behave like he is a civilian? So I hope this is clear. Okay, so I will conclude for today. You have the notes. Do you have access to OneDrive?
Yes.
So on OneDrive,
I only
you have
had Ocho and the one are closed or emphasis.
Please, I'll go one by one. So we'll start with Abad. Abad, do you have OneDrive, and do you have any comments or anything to say? So Abad, no comments. Yes. Okay. So in the OneDrive for everyone, you will find a PDF. You will find the books. You'll find movie clips. I'm trying to upload the movies, but it takes too much time. So if you want the movies, you can give me one day a hard drive of 1 tera, and I'll give you all the movies in one time if you have a hard drive of 1 tera. Or else you can find the movies on YouTube and the other platforms, because they are old movies. Now on OneDrive, you will find, if you open OneDrive, I will share the screen. So if you open OneDrive, I hope you're seeing the screen. Are you seeing it? Anyone say yes? You're not seeing the screen.
Not
Are you
yet.
seeing it?
Now I'm
Not yet.
seeing it.
How are you seeing? Great. So you see, if you open OneDrive, this is a map of what we did today, if you see it. I will send you these maps, don't worry. So if you open OneDrive, you go to the folder, you have the Deleuze folder, you have audios, books, movie clips, movies, and notes. Now, in the notes, you have a big PDF here, Deleuzean. You have Esthétique Deleuzienne, it's in French, but I advise you to use the English one. You have Deleuzean aesthetics. And if you open it, you have everything I say written. Everything I say is written and distributed by course. So today we did the first course, 01, aesthetics, metaphysical, biological, plastic, and political. And each chapter is one course. So if you go down, you have at the end, if you wish, readings at the end of the booklet. These numbers point towards readings at the end of the booklet. So you have the text by Bergson, by Deleuze, etc. And you have references, which are the references, the books. You have links, which are audio internet sites that can be useful. You have the bibliography of all the books that we use in this course. And then you have a filmography. So today, we did the aesthetics. It would be good if you watch Eisenstein's The Battleship of Potemkin, Gaunt's Napoleon, Griffith's Birth of a Nation, not Murnau, Long Metropolis. This is a mistake. Next time you will watch these, etc. So you see, in this course, it would be a good thing if you acquire a cinematographical culture, even though it's not only about cinema. But I think that no one knows, or very little people, at least who do plastic art or architecture, they really don't know anything about cinema. And things are very, very interesting on the cinematic side. Things become very clear in cinema. So these are the movies that you should watch. And then you have the course. So You have the first one, metaphysical, what you are saying, so everything is written. And then at the end, you have the table here comparing, the different political way of perceiving, etc. And at the end, you have the readings related to this lecture. You have the films related to this lecture, the references related to this lecture, and the audios of Gilles Deleuze himself related to this lecture. Okay, so you really have everything. If you look at the end of the booklet, you have these numbers with a little line, which are the numbers of the readings. So this is for the booklet. I hope it's clear. Now, if you look in the movie clips, you have aesthetics, and you have the movie clips I was talking about. Okay, so for example, if here I double click on Eisenstein's the Potemkin scene, this needs to download, so I'll click it here. It's the same. So here, so if you click on these movies, you will see that, because there is on the cloud, it needs oops. So where is it now? I'm not finding it. Oh. Okay, I'm lost in my feed. So it doesn't matter. It's here. Okay, sorry. So actually, if you click on these movies, you will find the clips. This one is from Napoleon Gauss, where you see the interactions. So this is what you have in the movie clips. I hope it's clear. Okay. Yes, it was on VLC, but I didn't know where was the window. So, so if you go back to this folder here in this one, so we said that you have Deleuze. The audios are courses that I recorded a while ago in different places, where you have an audio course in a normal classroom. So if you want to listen to it, you have what we said today, and you have the dates of the lectures, but you have also these audios recorded. You have the books, which are Deleuze Cinema 1 and 2 and Logic of Sensation. You have the movie clips that I talked to you about for each lesson that you can watch after I talk or while we are talking. And you have the movies that I'm uploading little by little. There's nothing yet. And the notes where you have the syllabus and the notes. So I hope it's clear how this course works. And of course, you have these sessions recorded. So sorry, I was a bit long today, but it's the first session. So for next time, please start watching the clips, read the notes, and if you have questions, contact me and I'll be able to re-explain. And we will get into the system fully next time. Do you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Yes, I have a question actually. When I open the drive,
what's your question? Yeah.
When I opened the drive, I only had the audio section.
Yeah.
The other sections were empty.
I don't know how to. You have to sync it.
I opened it on my phone actually.
I open it on your laptop and try to sync it, okay? And you should or open it or access it on the website, because maybe it's too big to download on your phone, okay? So you can access it on the website.
Yeah. Bat told me that I have to wait. Maybe that's why it was empty.
Yeah, so sometimes if it's too big, you have to wait for it to download. If you don't want to download it, contact the IT. You have the option save space, and it remains on the cloud. And each time you click on a file, only this file downloads. Did you get how you should do it? So I'll share again my screen. So if you click here on your files,
It doesn't show yet. Yeah, I can't
you
see
have
your
the
screen.
free up space option where it doesn't download everything. For it to show, I think you try to do it on your laptop and not on your phone. And if it doesn't work, contact the IT, and I'm sure they will have a solution.
Okay, thank you.
Does anyone has other questions?
For me, it has been downloading for like an hour now, even more. Like
Yeah, if you don't want it to download, I don't know, check the safe space option. This way it will not download the files. Anyways, the files are, now with the movie is going to be big. So get right click on it or double click on it and put safe space, and it will not download physically the files. It will just download the references, and when you want to file, it will play them from the source. Is it clear? Yeah.
yes.
And you can check with the IT for more details if you have an issue with that.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's it for today.
Thank you.
So we'll do the image perception, and I hope you start reading and getting into this thing, because it's a weird way of thinking, as you will see. So thank you for coming and for asking questions, and see you next Wednesday.
See you.
Ciao, bye-bye.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.
Ciao.
Stand up!